four walls of this State House, but what he did in his community, what he did for the state both before and after his service as governor, and how he really defined, not himself, but helped define the state of New Hampshire and truly make us a gold standard. Not just being one of the pack, but really understanding that New Hampshire is a little bit different and frankly a lot better, if we can be so selfish to say today. And he defined that, and he defined it with a smile. And one of the things we talk about a lot, I think, is that individuality. He understood that it wasn't about a big government and a big system, it was about the individual, and he had a way of translating that in such a special way and making everybody feel like, eye to eye, they were truly part of that New Hampshire process that we hold so dear. I'm now going to ask everyone to rise for the presentation of our national colors by the New Hampshire State Police Drill Team. I'm now going to ask if Maria Denola would join us to sing the national anthem. Good morning.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you very much. You can all be seated, and if we may, that was beautiful, Maria, so let's give Maria a round of applause. That was absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much. Wow. Well, thank you again for joining us. I'm nervous about letting it go. I'm not going to lie to you. Move. If you could just stand there and hold it. Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Excuse us. So it is not in your program to kick things off. We have a variety of different folks who are going to be joining us, having a few words on their life and experiences with Governor Merrill. But Heather Merrill's son, Stephen Merrill, just wanted to welcome you all. Stephen?
So I just want to take a second to say good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for being here, for my family and also my father, of course. You know, my father was somebody who put his true heart and soul into everything he did. He was very devoted to his family, his faith, and of course the state of New Hampshire. He's here to celebrate life today. He's looking down and he knows that we're continuing the New Hampshire advantage. So I just want to thank all of you on behalf of my family and of course my father. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Now I'd like to introduce someone who I guess first saw that spark, if you will, of the commitment to service in a young Steve Merrill's eyes prior to him being governor. And I guess in many ways opened the door for who later would become Stephen Merrill in terms of his public service for the state, former Governor John Sununu.
I don't walk as fast as the tall Governor Sununu does, so. Merrill family, all of you friends of Steve Merrill, friends of New Hampshire who are here today, I feel obliged to tell you that I don't intend to be downbeat, I intend to be upbeat today. I really think that's the way Steve would have wanted it. You know, we all have a style, we all have a persona, we all have a way of doing things. And Steve Merrill certainly fit that mold. I see a lot of gray hair here today, so some of you will remember that when I got elected governor in 1982, I was supposed to lose big. So when I got elected, I really wasn't prepared to do what one has to do to move into that corner office. And I quickly found out that one of the things I better do quickly was to get a legal counsel, so that we could at least deal with the requisite requirements of the process. I absolutely had no idea who to pick. So I went to Norm Stahl, who was a senior partner at Devine Willamette, and I asked him for a recommendation, and Norm says, well, you know, there's a young lawyer here. He's been out of the Air Force a few years. He served as a lawyer in the Air Force, and he's been with our firm, and he's got a lot of energy. You ought to talk to him. So I made an appointment with this young lawyer, and in those days, the transition was a little bit awkward. I think they gave us one small office in the first floor here to handle the process, and so Steve and I met in that office. And I started talking to him about the fact that neither one of us knew what we were going to be doing if we ended up doing what we thought we were going to do. And I found out very quickly that Steve Merrill was a serious person on serious issues who didn't take himself too seriously. And that, for me, was the ideal combination. I don't remember much of what we talked about today. I don't remember much of the specific words of the conversation with Steve Merrill. But I remember we laughed a lot. And that, for me, was sort of the closing argument. I went through the motions of telling him, well, let me sleep on this and I'll get in touch with you. The first thing I did the next morning was to call him up and offer him the job. And the first thing he did on the phone after I did is immediately accept. And that was the beginning of a beautiful friendship. We dealt with serious issues. We were determined at the time to change a lot of the ways New Hampshire used to do business. And I needed somebody who was smart legally to keep me from getting into too much trouble as governor. I needed somebody who thought outside of the box. But more than anything else, I really did need somebody who wanted to go through all of that and have fun in the process. Steve Merrill was the ideal choice. We changed the way the state plans for highways. We rebuilt most of the capital assets in the state. We changed the structure of government to a great extent, and we put the state on a sound accounting basis by being the first state in the country to go on GAAP. All of that required a lawyerly input so that we could accomplish it in a constructive way, and Steve Merrill was the one that guided that process. I think you're going to hear from a couple of other folks today that will talk a little bit about Steve coining the phrase New Hampshire's advantage, the New Hampshire advantage. It's a phrase he used, but he used it understanding that it was more than just talking about the tax structure of the state. Steve Merrill knew it was more than just talking about our commitment to local control. He knew it was more than our commitment to small government. He understood that the fundamental New Hampshire advantage was really inherent in our state motto, live free or die. He understood that the fundamental New Hampshire advantage is our commitment to freedom, liberty, and the rights of the individual. He not only put that into practice as my legal counsel, not only put it into practice as Attorney General for me, but after Judd Gregg's 4 years, he put it into practice as governor of the state of New Hampshire. Steve believed in those principles. He made sure they were part and parcel of policy. He made sure they were part and parcel of politics. Steve Merrill was a great lawyer. Steve Merrill was a great public servant. Steve Merrill was a great friend. We truly shall miss him.
Thank you very much, Governor. I have the honor of introducing a couple of governors today. And our second speaker is someone who I think, like myself, tried to emulate a lot of those values that Steve had brought to the corner office, as those were big shoes to fill, to be sure, for all of us. And really make sure that, again, it wasn't just about what you do in the office, but what you take outside of the office. And an individual who later became a great friend to Governor Merrill. At one point, I never saw one without the other. It was like Tweedledee and Tweedledum. I'm not going to say who was who, but I don't know who was who. But they were always together. They were a great duo. And for myself, on a point of personal connection, Steve and Governor Benson, who I'm going to introduce in a moment, really became just a great sounding board for me and my team in terms of what we've been trying to accomplish for the state. So with that, Governor Benson.
For the record, I'm Tweedledum. Heather, Stephen, Ian, Carissa, Faith, soon maybe. Thank you for sharing this day with us and allowing us to be part of it. I know it's a huge sacrifice on your part to be here and to open yourself up to what your father life meant to so many people, but it means so much to so many. You know, I read a lot of the things and saw on television some of the things they said about Stephen. Now, some of it was true. He definitely had a great smile, and he definitely knew how to have a great message. But they didn't really get into the depths of what he was able to do. He was a very talented man. Stephen was able to walk in a room of 200 or 200, and with every sense in his body, be able to figure out exactly what needed to happen. Not just sight, not just hearing, not just touch, not just smell. He used them all. And in a matter of seconds, he could figure out whether he had to pay condolences, give praise, give people excitement and innovation and motivation, and he could do it on a dime. I've never seen anybody like that. He was one of those people that also made it look really easy. And I was jealous of that because it's not easy for most people. It's certainly not easy for me. But I'll recall in the mid-90s, before the internet really got going and my company was producing most of the products for the internet, he came to a high-tech show where he and I were both to speak. And I knew him, but I didn't know him well. So he came in and sat next to me at the head table, and he said, "Craig, tell me about this internet thing." So I started telling him some things, and in about 5 minutes, he took actually 5 words on the back of a white envelope with the pen he always used to carry. And then he got up and gave a speech that was unbelievable. You would have thought he invented the internet. And I was blown away for 2 reasons. One is, how could he be this smart from just that short conversation with me? And 2, I had to follow him next, and there was no way I was going to be that good. But he was terrific. And through this whole process, I've gotten to know the family a little bit better, and especially Ian. And one of the things I realized is that when somebody makes it look easy, it's probably not easy. There's probably some things behind the scenes that you don't understand. Turns out Stephen was very intellectually curious. And in fact, he did that at home as well. At dinner, Stephen, Ian, Heather would sit at the table, and he would talk to them and read articles from the paper. And if people were clinking their silverware or talking out of turn and not paying attention, they would get the 10-pound stare, right, Ian? And the 10-pound stare was basically straighten up right now. And it cut right through you. But there was a worse stare. The worst stare was the 100-pound stare. And that stare, I didn't think I'd ever seen, but Ian informed me that actually the portrait that's on the second floor is the 100-pound stare. And that 100-pound stare says, get your life together. Get your life together, and it's placed in the State House where it's saying, get your life together for elected leaders to do the right thing for the people of the state of New Hampshire. On May 3rd, 2003, I got a call at home. It was a Saturday. Turned out the old man in the mountain had fallen down. And I knew I needed to get to Franconia Notch immediately, but I didn't realize how big a deal it was. When I got there, there was already a big commotion. There was a ton of people that had ideas. International press started showing up from China and Japan, Europe, South America. I'd never seen anything like it. And I realized the scope of what this was and all of the different things that people wanted to do to honor this great symbol of the state. And so I thought to myself, I can't do this alone. I need someone to help me. And they're going to have to be really smart. They're going to have to be really patient. And they're going to have to be really go through a very, very rigorous process. So I called Stephen, and I asked him to head it up. To this day, he hates me for doing that because he took the role. But he was able to put a group together, the task force, be able to do the things that we knew we needed to do for the great old man in the mountain, that is to keep that symbol alive for all of the citizens in the state and those from outside the state. And he did it with no taxpayer money, no legislative regulations or rules or laws. He did it the old-fashioned New Hampshire way. He built a coalition and made it happen. He's the kind of guy that has so many skills you can't even bother to list them. But one of the things he told me is, Craig, as a politician, you always want them leaving more. And what that means is make the visit a little bit shorter than you think it should be. Make the speech a few less words than you think it should be. And Stephen, I hope you think I've done that today. And I want to say that in his life and now in his death, Stephen, you have left us all wanting more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Governor. I'd now like to ask to the podium former U.S. Senator Kelly Ayotte.
Like many of you here today, I'm very sad to have lost a friend, my mentor, Governor Stephen Merrill. But I know if Steve were here with us right now, what he would be doing. He would be dishing out the sharp, funny one-liners about everyone here, and we would all be laughing. If Steve had not become a brilliant lawyer and a masterful political leader, he could have easily been a comedian. And the one thing we know about great comedians is that they have deep insight and they understand people. Steve certainly had that gift. He came from humble roots in the Seacoast, and he was very proud to be the first governor who had been a graduate of UNH. He was one of the smartest, the most articulate leaders that I have ever met, and he could make anyone feel comfortable, and he truly made you feel like you mattered when he walked in the room and he spoke with you. Part of his charm, which has already been talked about, is that Merrill smile. That Merrill smile could make anyone feel welcome. I got to know Steve when I served as actually legal counsel to Governor Benson, and then later as Attorney General. Steve had been an excellent Attorney General, what he called the public's lawyer, and I turned to him frequently for advice. He always had something smart and insightful to offer, no matter what your problem was. And one day he shared with me a little bit about when he first became Attorney General. It was really important for him to earn the respect of those line lawyers in the AG's office, because he had come from being the legal counsel to Governor Sununu, and he had not worked his way up through the office. So what he did is he came to the Attorney General's office, he did the work, and he led by example. He went to autopsies, he went to murder scenes, and he actually tried cases as Attorney General. And he didn't pick the cases. He let the staff members at the AG's office pick which cases that he would work on. And he would take on and try some of the hardest cases that other people in the office didn't want to deal with. And because of that, he became one of the most respected attorneys general within the office, and frankly, throughout the country. Since his passing, I have gotten literally dozens of emails from attorneys general from across the country, from both sides of the aisle, that knew Steve, people that he helped and made a difference for in so many ways. The word that I keep hearing from them is mentor. And I can relate to that because I was blessed to have Steve as my mentor. In 2009, when Judd Gregg announced that he was retiring, Steve actually got lots of calls asking him to run for Senate. And when he declined, he encouraged me, and he agreed to chair my campaign. From that moment on, I always called him chairman, and he always called me candidate. He even called me that when I saw him last week. Not only was Steve a source of sound advice, but he was unfailingly loyal. When he decided to be for something or someone, you could always count on him. As Attorney General, he fought tirelessly for victims of crime. As the governor, he stood up for taxpayers. And as a friend, he would never let you down. I remember the night of my primary during my first run for office. We were at the Courtyard here, Courtyard Marriott. I see Steve Duper here, who was there as well. We were in a room and we were waiting for the results to come in. And frankly, it wasn't looking too good for me. I was down by thousands of votes, but the votes were coming in slowly. It was past midnight, and Steve and Dave Wibby actually they had left and they were driving back to Manchester. And I was pretty upset, and I said, "Where's Merrill? Where's Merrill?" So Craig Benson got on the phone, he called Steve, and he said, "You know, Kelly's upset, and she is looking for you." Steve turned around, he came back to the Marriott, it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and he stayed for the rest of the night. Stephen Merrill helped me in the tough times, and he wasn't just there when I won, he stood by me when I lost. And that is the definition of a true friend. As I think of all the titles that Steve had, legal counsel, attorney general, governor, chairman, the one that mattered to him most was father. He often talked about Stephen and Ian and how proud he was of both of you. And I'm going to share a story that I know Ian shared. A few years ago, Steve asked Ian to get dressed up and to actually come up here to the State House. And they walked around together and talked about his time as governor, and Steve was introducing Ian to people who worked here at the State House. After that experience, Ian came to appreciate so much, because he was a very young child at the time, the enormity and the importance of his father's job as governor. And so the next day, he left his father a message on his phone, and he told him how proud he was of him and how much he loved him. And when Steve passed away, Ian went to look at his father's phone, and there was one voicemail saved on it. It was the voicemail that he had left for his father years earlier after they visited the State House, and it tells you exactly what Steve's priorities were and how much he cared for his family. Despite all of his accomplishments, Steve cared most about his family, about his friends, Heather, Ian, Steve, and Carissa. He loved you so much, and you're going to remain in our prayers. And thank you so much for sharing him with us. I know that's not easy. And Chairman, I just want to tell you that I'm going to miss you so much.
Thank you so much, Senator. I now want to bring up an individual who, frankly, personally, I've gotten to know very well over the past few years on a variety of different issues, who I guess you'd say was part of that Steve Merrill core team, if you will. He was always there with a great piece of advice. He was an individual who, when Steve gave you a good piece of advice, you always had to ask him, did that come from the judge? And sure enough, half of the time it did. But an individual who really stood by Steve through, again, good times and bad, because Steve was there standing behind each of us in good times and bad. I'd like to welcome to the stage Justice Broderick.
Good afternoon. I want to acknowledge, before I start, the Merrill family. I love the Merrill family. Heather and Ian and Stephen, Carissa and Faith. It's a hard day, I know that. It's a hard day for a lot of us, and the people here today are a tribute to your dad and to you and to the former First Lady of New Hampshire. I was honored to be asked to speak today. Steve Merrill was my closest friend. We were friends for over 4 decades. His life and mine were intertwined. He made me better. And when we were in our early 40s and we started our own law firm, we thought life was endless and the possibilities would match that. And one day, in the early days of our practice together, we went to lunch at the back room, which is where we ate most days. And we had both heard a eulogy in the recent past, and it became a topic for us to talk about. And we thought it was pretty poignant and pretty powerful. And in that context, and because we loved each other, I love Steve Merrill. I said to him with a smile, I said, Steve, why don't I give the eulogy at your funeral? And he smiled at me, and then he got very pensive and looked at me. And he said, I think I could agree to that. I said, it'd be great, Steve. He said, I just have one favor to ask you. I said, sure, what is that? He said, I'd like to give your eulogy first. We laughed about it for years. He's probably laughing today. It's appropriate that we have this service on the front steps of the State House. And I want to personally thank Governor Sununu and his staff for making this possible and for all the work that Ian did. And it's appropriate it's here because Steve touched so many lives from this building behind me. Steve Merrill was a politician who wanted to win you over, not knock you over. We could learn from him. We should learn from him. And he served as Attorney General in that building across the plaza. He was there 5 years. He was so proud to be the Attorney General, and I was so proud of him. But in an odd way, in a most respectful way, that's not why I love him. I knew Steve Merrill for over 4 decades. He served 10 or 12 years in public life. I knew him before, I knew him after. I loved him all that time. Steve Merrill was smart. He'd be the last one to share his credentials. He was a Phi Beta Kappa graduate of UNH. He went to Georgetown Law School. He was an editor of the Law Journal there. They don't give you that honor for perfect attendance. He was a captain in the U.S. Air Force. He served as general counsel to the Secretary of the Air Force all before I met him. I met him in the mid to late 70s, and I fell in love with him. He was the single most interesting person I have ever known. I almost can't imagine the future without those phone calls and those lunches. He was enormously talented, by the way. He'd be the last one to tell you that, too. He was a gourmet cook. I can make a grilled cheese sandwich. He was really talented. He could play the banjo and the guitar. He had a great singing voice. He was a wonderful writer. He was the most charismatic public figure I have ever met. And he was pretty humble about it, too. Steve Merrill was bipartisan. He had to be. I'm a Democrat. Didn't make a difference to us. I got a call the other night when I was with Patty, my wife, on my cell phone in my car. It was from President Clinton, who said, "I understand you lost your closest friend this week. How are you doing?" And then he talked to me about Steve Merrill with genuine affection. He knew him. He admired him, too. That doesn't happen much in America anymore. I can't summarize Steve Merrill's life. I wouldn't try, and he wouldn't want me to. But I would like to share just a few stories with you that I think point out who he really was and why I love him. When my father died on Cape Cod some years ago, died suddenly of a missed medication. My parents had been married for 53 years. It was devastating to my mother. I drove to the Cape that night, and it was a long night. My dad died at 1 a.m. The next day, I was with my mother at the house, and a car pulled into the driveway. We weren't expecting anyone. It was Steve Merrill. A trooper drove him down. Came into the living room. My mother loved him, too. And he talked to her in such a caring way. And then he said, "Buddy, come on, let's have a walk. I want to talk to you. I want to see how you're doing." We walked for an hour, got back in the car and went to Concord. He said, "Let me know what I can do." A few weeks later, my mother moved into our home. And I picked her up at the Cape that day. You can imagine that was a hard day for her. And she wanted to stop at the cemetery on the way north so she could tell my dad where she was moving. That was a hard moment, too. And when we got to our house in Manchester, I got her in the back door. She was using a walker then. My father had been gone for 3 weeks. She went down the back hall and then entered the kitchen. Standing in the kitchen with a bundle of colored balloons was Governor Steve Merrill. With that Merrill smile, he said, "Mrs. Broderick, I came here to officially welcome you to New Hampshire." He said, "I have one condition." She said, "What's that?" He said, I understand you're a Democrat. You can't register to vote here, but you can stay here. My mother laughed and smiled. I wasn't sure I'd see her do that ever again. That's why I love him. That's why I loved him. Some years ago, I became a fellow of the American College of Trial Lawyers, which means very little to most people, but to a trial lawyer, it was the highest honor of my professional life. And Patty was going to come with me to New Orleans where I was going to be inducted, but she was not well, and so I went by myself. I arrived in New Orleans on a Thursday afternoon. I checked into the hotel in the French Quarter. I got there about 3 o'clock, and I was wondering what I'd do for dinner. It wasn't until the following night when I would go to the dinner for the induction. About 5 o'clock, there was a knock at my door. I thought it was the bellman. So I opened the door, and it was Steve Merrill. It was shocking. He said, buddy, you didn't think I was letting you come down here and be sworn in without taking you out to dinner and celebrating. I said, are you serious? He said, that's exactly why I'm here. Who does that? When my son Christian was confirmed, he was 13 or 14. A few days later, there was an envelope that Christian brought in from the mailbox. It was hand-addressed, and the return address said, Heaven, hand-delivered by Angel 253784. And my son opened it, and it was a letter from heaven, presumably from God, who congratulated him on his confirmation, but said, based on your confirmation, Christian, I think you've earned the right to see a ZZ Top concert with Governor Merrill and his secretary, Pauline, or as we call Pauline, Pauline. He loved Pauline. My son still talks about that. Where do you find people like that? As phenomenal as he was in public life, as much as I admired his public service and was in awe of his gifts, that's not why I loved him. Last Thursday, a week ago yesterday, Patty and I went to see Steve at his home in Manchester. And Steve was dying. And Patty and I loved him, and we wanted to be there. And so we went into the room, and he was lying on a hospital bed. And he looked like Steve. He was frail and thinner, but it was Steve Merrill. And Patty grabbed his hand and said, Steve, we just came to tell you how much we love you. And he said, I love you guys too. And then I leaned over him about 6 or 8 inches from his face, and his eyes got pretty wide. I said, hey, I have a great idea, Steve. Why don't you get dressed and we'll go up to the back room for dinner. I'll treat. And he gave me that Merrill smile and he said, it's about time. Even in his pain, he was making mine less. That's why I loved him. And as we were leaving the room, Patty and I leaned over and I kissed his forehead. And I said, thank you, man, I love you. You changed my life. He said, I love you too. And then he waved to me and to Patty when we left. I have never met anyone like him, and I likely won't again, but I will never forget him. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Justice Broderick. So I really appreciate all the speakers that have joined us today, and I'm going to bring one more individual up. and hearing Justice Broderick tell his stories, I was sitting over there, and I'm sitting next to my dad over here, which is always awkward for a variety of reasons. So I was thinking when I first decided to run for governor, I said, well, I hadn't decided yet. I'm thinking about it. Who should I talk to? Well, it's probably smart to go talk to the former governors to see if it makes sense and what the job's like and all that. And so I talked to the 3 former governors that I could think of, and that, of course, was Judd Gregg and Steve Merrill and Craig Benson. And I went into Steve's office. He was the first. And I went into his office, and it's a quiet little office. He walked up the stairs in Manchester. And we talked a little bit about this and that, and you know, we had been very friendly for a while about, you know, what the job entailed. And then I said, look, you know, I was trying to boil down. He had all these great allegories, and, you know, he was just a great thinker. And I said, look, I just want some advice. What is the real core advice? And I, you know, being energetic, I got my little pen out and ready to take notes, the wise words of Steve Merrill. And he said, be genuine. I said, okay. And then there was this long pause. I said, and? He said, no, that's it. He said, that's it. I said, okay, if I run for governor, be genuine. He said, no, I don't care if you run for governor or not. You just got to be genuine. He said, of course I'm going to support you if you run for governor. He said, but it's a lesson whether you're running for governor or whether you're an environmental engineer, or whatever you do in life. I think it's a lesson for anyone, and I think that's what he said. He said, every day for the rest of your life, you got to wake up and look in the mirror and make sure the guy looking back at you is really who you are. That's it. He said, you stick with that, it's going to all work out. Simplicity. He really had a way of boiling down the most important fundamental things to something you could understand, grapple, and take with you and actually make something substantial. He did it for me. He did it for his family. He did it for the state. And I think it's something that we can all be grateful for. I got a call maybe Friday, I think it was Friday, maybe Thursday evening, Friday, from Governor Benson. And I knew, you know, we all knew Steve hadn't been doing great lately, hadn't been feeling well and all this. And Governor Benson called and he said, you know, Kelly and I just we had gone to see Steve, and you know, you should go see him. He's doing a little worse than usual, not feeling great, but you know, you should go see him, and I think it'd be a real pick-me-up. I said, absolutely. So on Saturday morning, the next day, I was headed to an event, and I called over, and I got Ian on the phone, and I said, hey, I'm in the Manchester area, thought I'd swing by it, you know, after this event, you know, maybe at lunch and see Dad. And Ian said, geez, you know, he's not with us. And it hit really hard. And I think it hit a lot of us hard because, as you can hear today, he was the type of guy you thought would just always be there. And he is. He's still here in many, many different ways. His portrait is still here, giving the 100-pound stare. See it every day. And I think there's a lot through the stories we've heard today and a lot with our own journey that we had with Steve Merrill that we can take with us. To kind of close things out today, I can't think of anyone more fitting than to ask Ian to come up and say a few words.
Bear with me, I was a little smaller last time I was up here. Good afternoon. I'm Steve Merrill's oldest son, Ian, and on behalf of his entire family, I would like to thank Governor Chris Sununu and the entire staff, all of you here, for making this possible. Your love and support has picked us up during a very difficult time. None of us expected this. None of us wanted it. I just have to thank you to all of you that are here. Thank you to all of the true American heroes in this world. And we will never forget you. And thank you, Dad. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. Thank you very, very much. Well, thanks again for everyone for coming. I'd like to ask you all, if you don't mind, if we can stand for a closing prayer before we have the Honor Guard render military honors. Dear Lord, we are so grateful that you've made us all in your own image, giving us gifts and talents with which to serve you. Thank you for Stephen's life and all the years we shared with him. We lift him to you today in honor of the good that we saw in him and the love we felt from him. For it's the Bible that tells us, for not one of us lives for himself, and not one of us dies for himself. Now may the Lord Jesus Christ himself and God our Father, who has loved us and given us eternal comfort and good hope by grace, strengthen your hearts in every good work and in every word. Please give us the strength to leave him in your care, in the knowledge of eternal life, through Jesus Christ. Amen. Now I'll call on the Air Force Honor Guard to render the military honors. Well, on behalf of the Merrill family and his friends, I just want to thank everyone for joining us here today to celebrate such an amazing individual. Have a great day. God bless.